Hello, my name is Adrienne. I'm a design researcher.
And I'm Yadida. I'm a content designer.
We work at the Canadian Digital Service, where we work in multidisciplinary teams. We're going to talk to you today about how we collaborated on the privacy and consent forms for research activities to increase the diversity of participants. So this is a brief representation of the steps a research participant might go through to participate in research. So from awareness of the research activity to interest in participation, the sign-up process, receiving the invite, deciding to participate, participating in the research activity itself, the debrief, and the receiving compensation. So what we're looking for throughout this whole process is for a large diversity of people to go through these steps and to have a good experience. Barriers to entry can be present at any of these steps. This reduces how many people participate in a research activity and the diversity of people. If we don't have participation from a diverse group of people, we're limited in our ability to build an inclusive product. Now, we won't be talking about every barrier today. We'll be focusing on the decide to participate step. So in order to decide to participate in most research activities, participants need to give informed consent. And this is a typical privacy and consent form we would use. And like other typical legal documents, it uses a lot of jargon and difficult sentence structures. And I know it's difficult to see on the screen here for the text, but how would you feel looking at this? You may feel intimidated or uncomfortable about participating. You might not participate at all if you feel like you don't know what you're getting yourself into. It may reduce participation, especially from people who speak English as a second language and people who have literacy challenges. So though not often intended by the researcher, participants can feel uncomfortable at any point in the research process due to physical, social, and economic power imbalances. Conducting research in government, there's an added imbalance due to perceived and real power that government employees have over people's lives. Many government employees make decisions about whether someone can be accepted into a social program, have filed their taxes correctly, and whether you can become a citizen. Even though Yadida and I don't hold such roles in government, many people perceive the government as one big monolith. So the privacy and consent form is a really critical piece to making a participant feel comfortable in participating in research, and it's an attempt from us to cede some power. And as a government team, there are specific information a privacy and consent form must include, but the generalizable list of information for teams outside of government might look like this. So you need to outline the consequences of participation, identify the types of data that you'll be collecting, how participants can access or retract the data that you've collected about them, who you'll share the data with, and where participants can go if they have a complaint. So Yadida will walk us through some content design best practices that we use to improve the privacy and consent form. And not every team has access to a content designer, but we're hoping that these are still helpful.
So we try to use the active voice, and that's because it's more difficult to understand sentences when the verbs are in the passive tense. And let's look at an example so that I can give you a better explanation of this. So in the original privacy and consent form, we said Qualtrics is being used on behalf of the government of Canada. The new version says we use a company called Qualtrics to collect and store data. So earlier in the document, we had explained that we would refer to the government of Canada. So we were able to replace government of Canada with we. And then if you change the sentence to the active voice, it becomes we use Qualtrics. And so you'll see that when you do that, there's some ambiguity, and we see that there's questions that people might have. What is Qualtrics? What is Qualtrics being used for? So that helps us then to realize that ambiguity and to answer those questions with some more detail. We use a company called Qualtrics to collect and store data. Another thing we do in content design is avoid technical words and avoid clumping nouns together in what we call noun strings. And again, an example will help me to explain that. So the original said, please read their data security protection statement for more details. So you've got a noun string with data security protection statement. Those 4 words are nouns and they're all technical words. So that becomes hard for people to unpack. So that's why we explain, we unpack it for them and we say, you can read how Qualtrics protects data and privacy. The reason part of the sentence is underlined is that in the document, we hyperlink that part of the sentence to parts of the Qualtrics screen that give more detail about this, because we want to acknowledge that there are some people who will want more information about this and make it easy for them to get that information. Headings are a really important part of content design. We know that many people will just scan or skim the page to find the information that we're looking for. So we work with them on that. We give them headings so they can do that more efficiently. And headings also allow us to organize and give hierarchy to our document and just to decide what's the most important parts. We don't have time today to discuss how we made decisions in this document about what to put first, but I just want to flag that it was and is part of the process of coming up with headings, and it's also one of the benefits of using headings. So in the example, the stars show you the headings, and you can see that just by looking at those, you get some key information. The information is that you have a choice, that if you agree to this, that if you make that choice to participate, that you're agreeing to certain things, and you can see exactly where in the document you can agree you can read about what you're agreeing to. And you can also easily find the section on privacy. Headings have another function as well. We can use them to guide the participant through what they need to do and the order of steps that they need to follow. Again, an example will help me to show this. So most of our headings indicate the step that the reader needs to take, and this includes the most important heading on the page, the title. So in the original, we had welcome, but in our new version, it becomes decide if you'll participate in this survey. So immediately people know what they need to do. And for some people, they know right from that that they are not interested in reading further, that they don't want to participate. And so they don't have to spend the time reading further. On one side here, you have our original privacy and consent form, and then you'll see the new version on the other side. Another change in our version is that there are less words. The original had 380, our version has 235. Now, I want to stress that reducing the number of words is not the goal of content design. Sometimes you may need to increase the number of words to make things clear and explain what people need to know. But one thing that you always do with content design is remove words that are not necessary or do not serve a purpose, so that the reader does not have to spend time on them, so that the document is easier to read and more accessible. And in doing that, in this case, we came up with a shorter document and a document that we hope is easier to read. We like to think of content design as equity seeking work, because by making our content easier for everyone to understand, we're hoping that we've leveled the playing field between the people with power over the content and the people who need to understand the content.
So in terms of next steps, we talked about how we use some best practices to improve the form, but we'll be looking to see how inclusive the form is in real life. And we'll also be considering what other barriers might exist in the research participation experience that I've outlined earlier, such as the tools we use and other processes that we might use. So thank you very much for your attention, and extra thanks to our colleagues who helped out with this presentation. And a few links are posted here for more information on this topic.